Homeowner got what was coming to him after daily harassment. I worked an engineering, construction job last year for a home builder, and we had to deal with a bunch of 5G anti-vaxxer health nuts moving into one of our neighborhoods. Constant complaints about the construction, the noise, the debris, which made no sense because they chose to move into the neighborhood before construction was completed. One man in particular would harass us daily, complaining about the streetlights being too bright, they weren't, and complaining about a generator we had running about a block away from him to power the site temporarily until we had the infrastructure in. The complaints ranged from the generator was damaging his hearing, thing was almost completely silent, or that the fumes from the generator were coming into his house and causing him and his kids to have stunted development. They would come up with stuff that made little to no sense. It escalated to the point where he got the city and the mayor involved, and we got sued, so we gave in to his requests and moved the generator to an inconvenient location and had to take the time and money to rewire to be able to power the areas needed. This was including important stuff like the streetlights. We had to leave off for a couple nights until the move was complete, and you guessed it, he would call to complain. The nerve of this man. So, here comes the revenge. We received an order from the city to install a 5G tower on site to improve cellular connection because the area we were in had pretty bad service. Since my team and I were in charge of creating the plans to install the infrastructure, guess where we all simultaneously agreed to put the tower? Right smack dab in front of the angry man's house. We thought this was incredibly hilarious and couldn't stop laughing every time he would call, freaking out while the tower was being constructed. Got to the point he tried to file another lawsuit, got laughed away, and within a week we never heard from them again. Moved out faster than the wind. Revenge of the construction workers. I am a teacher, and when I was younger, I would take summer jobs to supplement my income. One summer, I worked for a bricklayer named Jerry and heard an amazing story. I worked for Jerry in the mid-90s, so the story either happened in the early 90s or in the 80s. Here goes. The setting for the story was a community of small rural towns which had only one brick contractor. Jerry began his career as a bricklayer working for this contractor, a real jerk. Jerk and Jerk's son, adult working the business with his father, would harass, belittle, and humiliate all their employees on a regular basis. No work was ever good enough and employees were told they weren't worth what they were paid. Not only did Jerk mistreat his employees, but he was equally rude to other subcontractors and to the general contractors who hired him. Since he was the only bricklayer in the community, there was nothing anyone could do about it. Needless to say, the turnover rate for the brick business was very high. The only person that stuck with Jerk and company was Jerry. Jerry told me that his father had instilled a self-confidence in him that Jerry could do anything he set his mind to do and that he should not evaluate himself according to what others said, but rather by the facts. Although Jerry was belittled by Jerk and Son as were all other employees, Jerry was becoming a very good bricklayer. Jerry knew he was good. Jerk knew Jerry was good. But Jerk didn't know that Jerry knew he was good. Not only was Jerry a good bricklayer, he was very respectful to the boss who disrespected him. Jerk thought that Jerry was a naive pushover who was buying his head games. That would prove to be a huge mistake on his part. One day, Jerry was doing an exceptionally good job of laying brick. Not only was his craftsmanship amazing, he was laying brick at a high rate of speed so that he was making his boss lots of money. Of course, Jerk and Son were belittling his work as though he was doing the very opposite. This scenario was being observed by the general contractor of the project. After work that day, the general contractor asked Jerry to stay behind so he could talk to him. As did every other construction worker in the community, general contractor hated working with Jerk. General contractor told Jerry that he had heard Jerk and Son belittling him, and told him that he disagreed with everything Jerk was saying. He asked Jerry if he had ever considered going into business for himself. Jerry said that he would like to do that someday. General contractor then said that he would loan Jerry the money to buy a mixer, the most expensive piece of equipment needed to start a brick business, if Jerry would indeed start said business. The only hitch was that Jerry would need to pay for the mixer whenever he could and that he would subcontract under general contractor. Jerry agreed to those terms and prepared to begin his new venture. Jerry respectfully told Jerk and Son his plans and gave his notice. The two mocked Jerry ruthlessly and laughed him to scorn. Jerk told Jerry, "You'll be back in 2 months begging to return to your job, you'll never make it as a subcontractor." 2 months later, rather than collapsing as Jerk predicted, Jerry was still in business and going strong. 1 year later, Jerry's business was booming and a drunk Jerk showed up at Jerry's house and begged him to come back to work with Jerk and Son. "Jerry, you're the best employee I ever had." Jerry replied, "Why didn't you ever tell me that when I was working for you?" Jerk couldn't answer the question, and Jerry obviously didn't accept the offer for employment. 2 years after beginning his entrepreneurial adventure, Jerry heard that Jerk and Son went out of business. Jerry said that he never intended to harm Jerk and Son when he accepted general contractor's offer. He said that looking back on things he realized that he had become Jerk's greatest nightmare. "I can't say that general contractor intended no harm. I thought the most amazing thing about the story was how that Jerry maintained his self-esteem in spite of all the ridicule. I also gained a respect for Jerry's father who instilled an unshakable self-confidence in Jerry." Edit, I contacted Jerry today, after 20 years, to let him know how highly you thought of him. He reminded me that his father was wheelchair-bound and accomplished so much in spite of his handicap. It was his father's overcoming huge obstacles that made Jerk's words seem to be such a minor obstacle to overcome. Don't mess with Sandra. TLDR at bottom. This tale was told to me as a warning when I started on my first post-college job. I am relating it exactly as it was told to me. This occurred in the early 80s, so those of you who've grown up with the internet may not understand how we did things in the olden days. There were no smartphone apps to show Q codes for airline tickets. They were paper, with red carbon mess. Reservations were done by phone. It was primitive by today's standards. Players' names have been changed, of course. Chandra, super sweet secretary loved by all. True, I worked with her. She was amazing. Fred, Chandra's boss. Tom, local VP. Big Shot, incoming manager from back east. Al, lead engineer on the team. This occurred in Salt Lake City, which, if you don't know, family was a huge part of culture. Even at work, family matters took precedence, and local management knew this and allowed for it. Well, Big Shot's office minions in another corporate location noticed some slight irregularities in time cards, like days off without pre-approved vacation requests. So he got himself transferred to the Salt Lake City office to straighten things out. He was pushy, and naturally, he was quickly hated. Big Shot ended up as a middle manager between Tom, at the top, and Fred. One morning, Chandra got a call from her daughter was unexpectedly in town and wanted to have lunch. Naturally, Fred and Tom gave her the okay. Big Shot didn't like that, although it wasn't explained why. Maybe it wasn't by the book, maybe he was upset that Sandra went over his head. In any event, he decided to stick his nose in. But rather than just say no, he dropped a last-minute urgent travel request on Sandra's desk, and it had to be done because he expected to fly out that afternoon. Chandra was heartbroken that she wouldn't get to see her daughter, but she had her work responsibilities. Stopping by to drop off some paperwork, Al noticed that Sandra looked a little down, a huge change from her normal chipper mood. He naturally asked why, and Chandra explained. Al told her, he had no authority, by the way, to go have lunch and we'll take care of it. Big Shot got his travel packet, got on the plane that afternoon, and flew off to his meeting. That's when things started to go wrong. The rental car reservation was invalid, and there were no cars available at any of the agencies, all had a hold on them pending confirmation from some clients. So Big Shot ended up getting a rent-a-wreck. For those too young or not in the US, there really was a discount auto rental agency by that name. Quality was not job one. When Big Shot got to the hotel, he found that his reservation was no good. He had to wait around until after the tentative reservations expired, which was after 6 p.m. Getting suspicious, Big Shot looked at his tickets, and found they were one-way. He had no flight home. To say Big Shot was incensed was probably an understatement. The next morning, Tom flew in to join him, and he gave Big Shot a packet that was marked extremely urgent that had been left on his desk with a note to take it to Big Shot. It was Big Shot's return ticket. On the way back, Big Shot detoured by the corporate head office and got a very senior exec to come with him because of some very serious personnel problems. The next morning, Big Shot led the senior exec and Tom into a meeting with all of Fred's department and began publicly berating Sandra for incompetence and so on. When he got to the part about the tickets, Fred interrupted and told the senior exec that Sandra couldn't have done that. She was on approved time off having lunch with her daughter. This raised the senior exec's eyebrows and got Big Shot even angrier. The senior exec said if Sandra didn't mess up the tickets, who did? Fred stepped forward. Then Al. And one by one, every single member of Fred's team stepped forward to take responsibility to protect Sandra from Big Shot's wrath. Tom and the senior exec knew instantly what had happened. Everyone on Fred's team had burned up the phones making tentative reservations for rental cars and hotel rooms, leaving Big Shot stuck with the one-way ticket, worthless reservations, and no alternatives. Within the hour, Big Shot's desk was empty and his badge had been turned in. It was never explained if Big Shot was fired or if he was just quickly relocated. The senior exec stuck around to get to know the team. He was very impressed with how the whole team stuck together and protected their own. After he finished telling me the tale, the engineer said bluntly, "Don't mess with Sandra. We love her, and we will make you pay if you upset her." Message received loud and clear. As I worked with Fred's team, I got to understand why everyone loved Sandra. She was an absolute gem in the organization, efficient, super friendly, just an all-around wonderful person. DLDR, Big Shot manager flies into straighten out an office and becomes hated. When he upsets the secretary, the entire project team schemes to give him a dose of humble pie. Then he tries to get corporate management to back him, and ends up getting removed himself. Addendum, I appreciate all the kind words and awards. Allow me to clarify a point or two. Note, everything is from what I was told, because I wasn't there, so I apologize for any possibly incorrect inferences I have made from the tale. From what was said, Big Shot was not well liked. He had a strict by-the-book mentality, and was a bully. Tom and Fred had told Sandra it was okay to take a long lunch with her daughter. Big Shot didn't like that because it didn't meet the week advance approval policy. Just a guess, but it's possible he got his panties in a bunch because the request went over his head, too. He couldn't stop Sandra, but he could bully her and make her miss the lunch meeting because he didn't like the informality of approval in the SLC branch. He might have intended to demonstrate that he was Fred's superior and people needed to get his approval, and possibly to instill a little fear. Didn't work out so well for him. Addendum 2. Some of the respondents apparently aren't reading the comments, so let me clarify for those who want to be a contrarian or a jackass. From the way I was told the story, Big Shot was not removed from his job for doing his job. Sandra had permission from Big Shot's boss. That's explained in several comments below. His job did not include authority to override his boss's decision. He was removed for trying to bully Sandra, who she had permission. He was not doing his job.